Well, Cyril, most of what we are hearing is the official lines coming from Iran, from the IAEA. Also, we heard Russia is condemning the attack. But the core of this problem is that the threat of radiations, this is what everyone fears. Now, with the reports from IAEA that there is no radiations, this at least soothes the concern. But still, there is a very big issue here, especially that Natanz is the biggest. It has the largest number of centrifuges. Now, no one knows where the Iranian highly enriched uranium amounts are, because there are about 400 kilograms, 480 kilograms of highly enriched uranium somewhere in Iran. And there were reports and actually Iranian officials saying on several occasions that they're buried under the rubble. Now, whether they are buried under the rubble of Isfahan, Natanz, or Fordo, this is another issue. But the problem is that the more these facilities are hit, the more there is a threat of radiation. And whenever there is radiation, and you know, these are not the only nuclear facilities. There's another one in Bushehr, and the Russians have been warning from rounds and from missiles falling beside the Bushehr facility, because any strike for Bushehr will cause contamination in the Gulf, and that would be a really huge issue. Also, there's the nuclear facility here in Tehran, just behind us in Tehran. Also, last week, the Iranian nuclear watchdog, or the Iranian nuclear organization, issued some warnings to people and asked them to stay away from this building, from the buildings of the nuclear facility here in Tehran, because any hit for such a facility could be really very dangerous for people's lives.
Ali, something else that we'd like your reporting on to find out how significant this is. Iranian media are reporting that the armed forces launched 2 ballistic missiles towards Diego Garcia. That's an island in the Indian Ocean that hosts a joint UK-US military base. Now, before the war, Iran was believed to have missiles capable of striking targets 2,000 kilometers away. But for an Iranian weapon to reach Diego Garcia, it would need to have a range of more than 4,000 kilometers. The UK Defense Ministry has confirmed that the attack was unsuccessful. So, Ali, what does it mean if Iran really can aim at targets that far away?
You know, Cyril, the moment this war started, everything has changed. And what really applied before the war could have really been changed now, especially with the change in the leadership, because the man who was capping Iran's Iran's missile range was Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and he's the one who said that the range should be 2,000 kilometers, and that was meant to soothe the concerns with to the country's ballistic program. But given the fact there is an active ballistic program in Iran, and there is already an active space program in Iran, the idea of the range actually isn't the real matter here. It's the signal. What happened yesterday, the launch of those couple of rockets or missiles, isn't meant actually to say that we can hit. Rather, it's meant to send a signal to the UK, to Britain, given the fact that Diego Garcia is itself a British base also, and to the United States. And that's the political motive behind what happened yesterday.
Ali Hashem reporting from the Iranian capital. Thank you very much, Ali. And as we reported, U.S. Central Command says that Iran's ability to strike ships in the Strait of Hormuz has been degraded. Admiral Brad Cooper says attacks earlier this week targeted an underground weapons facility. Listen to this.
We also remain zeroed in on dismantling Iran's decades-old threat to the free flow of commerce throughout the Strait of Hormuz. For example, earlier this week, we dropped multiple 5,000-pound bombs on an underground facility located along Iran's coastline. The Iranian regime used the hardened underground facility to discreetly store anti-ship cruise missiles, mobile missile launchers, and other equipment that presented a dangerous risk to international shipping. We not only took out the facility, but also destroyed intelligence support sites and missile radar relays that were used to monitor ship movements. Iran's ability to threaten freedom of navigation in and around the Strait of Hormuz is degraded as a result, and we will not stop pursuing these targets.
Al Jazeera's Manuel Rapallo is in Washington, D.C., and joins us now with more on this. Manny, the Strait of Hormuz has become arguably Iran's greatest leverage point in this war. That strait is right now almost entirely blocked. That means that the energy that is produced in the Middle East can't get out to market really across the world. And now we're hearing from the CENTCOM commander, they feel that they have, quote, degraded Iran's ability to put pressure and a security threat on the strait. We don't see that yet on the ground. Ships are still not going through the strait. What more can you tell us?
Cyril, as you say, the greatest point of leverage in this war, a major focal point in the war, the messaging, the narrative, everything at this point centering around the Strait of Hormuz. And there does appear to be a gap between what the White House says that it wants with the Strait of Hormuz and what the military, the U.S. military, says it's already doing in the Strait of Hormuz. So on the one hand, you have President Donald Trump signaling, well, he's been clear that he wants other countries, NATO allies and other countries in the world, to step up militarily, to share in the burden of securing the waterway. But what we're hearing from Admiral Cooper, the commander of U.S. Central Command, is that the United States is still carrying out major operations, as you heard in that opening soundbite there, dropping bunker buster bombs on underground missile sites, targeting radar systems. The Admiral is very clear in this message that the U.S. is not stepping back and is actively continuing to work to degrade Iran's ability to target any sort of commercial energy shipments through the Strait of Hormuz. So what we're seeing is sort of two different objectives here by the Trump administration and by the U.S. military. On the one hand, it's political. So it's continuing to put pressure on U.S. allies to step up, to do more, to share in that burden of securing the waterway. And two, militarily, the U.S. is still leading this fight. The U.S. is still carrying most of the responsibilities of military operations. And optically, President Trump wants to bring this war to an end. So politically, getting more countries involved, and militarily, optically, getting this war over, or at least signaling to the American people that the operation is almost complete.
You say the U.S. president wants to bring this war to an end. Manny, I want to bring in his latest statement on Truth Social. On Friday, President Trump posted on his social media suggesting that the U.S. is, quote, considering winding down its military efforts in the region. He said the U.S. is getting very close to meeting its objectives, which included degrading Iran's missile capability, eliminating the Navy, the Air Force, and preventing any Iranian nuclear capability, and protecting also the U.S.'s Middle Eastern allies. So, Manny, Trump says he's considering winding down the war. We heard from the CENTCOM commander who said, well, the U.S. military has degraded Iran's ability to threaten the Strait of Hormuz. Should we be connecting those dots? Is that perhaps the beginning of an off-ramp in this war?
That could very well be the case. Maybe not a diplomatic off-ramp, but an economic off-ramp. There's this statement here by President Trump is counterintuitive, but there is a strategy here, despite the fact that it does sound a little contradictory, winding down the war, but at the same time deploying thousands of troops, at the same time requesting more funding for continued operations. The strategic message here that the president is trying to say is he's signaling that the U.S. is very close to achieving these aims. He lists the degrading missile capabilities, undermining Iran's ability to influence in any sort of way beyond its borders. That's essentially the message that Trump is sending to the American people, that this war militarily has already been won. The American people, who are growing increasingly concerned over how long this war is going to last, how much it's going to cost, and at the same time, the Pentagon is reinforcing the region, restocking weapons stockpiles, providing additional naval assets, replenishing, sending additional troops, thousands of troops, which is why the Pentagon is requesting more money to the tune of $200 billion, which will be presented to Congress fairly soon. And we're hearing from Admiral Cooper, as you say now, that the U.S. is keeping that pressure constantly, and that is very expensive for the United States. This is We know that from previous interventions like Iraq and Afghanistan. So I think this is less of a contradiction and more of a strategic message directed to separate audiences here, right? Reassuring the American people that this is going to be coming to an end. President Trump signaling that he wants this war to wind down, but he also doesn't want to project any sort of idea of weakness. He wants to do so while still projecting a lot of strength internationally.
Manuel Rapallo in Washington, D.C., thank you very much. Noor O'Day joins us now for the Israeli perspective. You're in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Noor, just hours after Donald Trump said that he was considering winding down, his words, the war against Iran, Israel's defense minister said that attacks on Iran on their end will continue on an even greater scale. Listen to this.
This week, the intensity of the strikes to be carried out by the IDF and the U.S. military against the Iranian terror regime and the infrastructure on which it relies will rise significantly. The campaign led by U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will continue. We are determined to keep leading the offensive against the Iranian terror regime, to behead its commanders and thwart its strategic capabilities until every security threat is eliminated.
Nor the Israeli defense minister saying that the Israeli and American campaign is going to continue. How do you interpret those statements?
Well, Sarah, in Israel, the assessment is that this war could end abruptly if the U.S. president decides so. And so what is happening is that Israel is maximizing benefit in the time that it has left. So it is going after the foundations of the regime in Iran, or the system of government in Iran. It is not hitting, for example, the assets, the nuclear sites, the ballistic missiles, and so on. It is focusing more on hitting leaders, on hitting even checkpoints of internal security and so on, because the military and intelligence community in Israel says that Israel has to maximize benefit while it still has the American go-ahead and the American involvement in the war, because as soon as Trump says this war is over, it will be extremely difficult for Israel to maintain any kind of military posture with Iran.
And Noor, while this joint U.S.-Israel military campaign continues, Israel has been focusing on eliminating, assassinating Iran's leaders, political leaders, military leaders, intelligence, security, really across the board. It's something that you've been looking at in quite some depth. What have you found?
Right. I mean, this is part of a policy that has made Israel's spy agency notorious, conducting thousands of attacks against people of all nationalities across the globe. And even though there are questions as to whether this policy of assassinations really works, it is something that Israel has been practicing since its establishment in 1948. We've prepared this report for you. Take a look. Cries for revenge grow louder in Iran. Hundreds of thousands mourn high-ranking figures killed in Israeli strikes just weeks after the assassination of the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Israel promises they won't be the last. They were also not the first. Israel has used political assassinations since its inception, starting with Swedish diplomat Folk Bernadotte, killed by a Zionist armed group known as the Sterngang in 1948. Over the decades, Israel has carried out thousands of covert and public assassinations around the world. The Mossad, its spy agency, stood behind many of those operations, which included abductions, hit squads, bombings, and even poison. In the 1960s, the Mossad unleashed Operation Damocles, targeting German scientists working with Egypt, led by Jamal Abdel Nasser, to develop its missile capabilities. In the 70s and 80s, Israel assassinated dozens of Palestinians, intellectuals, including author Ghassan Kanafani, and diplomats such as Mahmoud al-Hamshari, as well as other prominent figures like Khalil al-Wazir. The targeted killings accelerated after the year 2000, claiming the lives of many well-known activists and high-profile political figures in the occupied West Bank and Gaza. Among them, PLO leader Abu Ali Mustafa in 2001, and Hamas founder Sheikh Ahmed Yassin in 2004. Palestinians have long maintained that Israel was behind the mysterious illness and subsequent death of President Yasser Arafat. Israel is also accused of assassinating dozens of Iraqi and Iranian scientists over the years. By 2023, state-sponsored killings had reached industrial scale. Hundreds of Palestinian journalists, artists, academics, and doctors were targeted, often with their families. During the war on Gaza, Israel assassinated senior Hamas leaders in Gaza, Beirut, and Tehran. It also killed Hezbollah's longtime leader, Hassan Nasrallah, and just days later, his favored successor, along with other senior officials. Now Israel has removed political approvals needed for assassinations, authorizing the army to target any Iranian or Hezbollah leader when the opportunity arises. But questions remain, though, as to whether all these killings will make Israel safe as its leaders claim. History suggests otherwise. Nooradi, Al Jazeera, Ramallah, Palestine.
Israel says buildings have been damaged as Iran continues to target areas across the country. At least 6 impacts have been reported in Rishon LeZion, just south of Tel Aviv. Several buildings were damaged and shrapnel fell in 3 places. There has also been extensive damage to a daycare center in the city. And Iran has been keeping up attacks on neighboring Gulf states as well. A series of drone and missile strikes targeted Kuwait, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. Emirati air defenses intercepted several projectiles over the skies of Dubai. Both Saudi Arabia and Kuwait say that their air defenses have been working through the morning. Al Jazeera's Rasul Serdar is in Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. Brief us on the latest attacks against Saudi Arabia, Rasul.
Well, just starting from midnight on, we have seen that the Saudi Ministry of Defense have released statements saying that tens of Iranian drones have been intercepted and then 5 more. And these kind of statements have continued through the whole day. And according to Saudi officials, in the last 24 hours, 56 drones were intercepted over the Saudi Arabian airspace. A little bit ago, I was talking to a retired general in the Saudi Armed Forces. He was expressing the confidence in Saudi Arabia's capability of defending itself. He's saying that they have quite sophisticated air defense systems and the country has the strongest air forces in the region. However, having said that, we've seen that these drones are particularly aimed at the eastern province of Saudi Arabia, where majority of Saudi energy resources and the export terminals and also the processing plants are located. And that is putting huge pressure, of course, on the Saudi Arabian economy. So because these drones are aimed at cutting off the country's economic lifelines. Saudi Arabia has an advantage that most of the countries in the region don't. So Saudi Arabia can bypass the Strait of Hormuz and transfer most of the energy through the Red Sea. So, but as of now, still 70% of Saudi Arabia's energy export is happening through the Gulf, Strait of Hormuz, while 30% is happening through the Red Sea. However, having said that, Iranian drones or missiles are not only attacking the eastern province of the country. Indeed, in the recent days, we have seen that some of the Iranian missiles were targeting the city, of course, the city of Yanbu on the Red Sea, the western part of the country, which is a quite important the energy facility city of Saudi Arabia. So in that sense, the Saudis here are saying yes, the energy prices are going up, but this is not something that Saudi Arabian officials are happy about, because the uncontrolled sharp rise of the energy prices is not something preferable by Saudis, and also they see that this is going to further destabilize the region. While that's happening, the pressure is not only on the economy here. Just 2 days ago, when the foreign ministers of several Islamic countries were having a meeting in Riyadh, here in this very city, so 3 Iranian ballistic missiles attacked the capital. And we have heard the harshest statement coming from Saudi officials here. Indeed, the country's foreign minister, Faisal bin Farhan, said that the trust between Riyadh and Tehran is shattered. Just remember, in 2023, Riyadh and Tehran signed a deal in Beijing, And the reason for that agreement was that in case of any conflict between Israel and Saudi Arabia, that Saudi Arabia is not going to be attacked. But this recent escalation has tested the limits of that agreement.
Rasul, today, once again, Iran continued its campaign of targeting its neighbors. Really, the majority of Gulf countries were once again targeted today. Can you give us a full picture of what Iran was going after and how much damage may have been done?
Well, indeed, so UAE was the Emiratis are saying that 8 drones but since the beginning of the war on the 28th of February, so the numbers are quite huge. 356 missiles and 1,048 drones just for United Arab Emirates. And then we have seen yesterday Iranians warning the residents of the city of Ras Al Khaimah, saying evacuate because there has been attacks conducted from Ras Al Khaimah over Iran. And that is one thing. And also in Kuwait, so Kuwaiti officials are saying that they have intercepted just today 9 ballistic missiles and then 4 drones. And in Saudi Arabia, 56 drones in the last 24 hours. So here, that is happening. So we're seeing that there is a growing frustration for the region. And because the Iranians' attacks are not only targeting the American military assets here, but the energy facilities are heavily being targeted. The airports are being targeted, the civilian infrastructure, and also the residential areas. And on the top of that, so the Strait of Hormuz is remaining closed. And today there has been a joint statement from from United Arab Emirates, lots of countries involved in that statement, saying that they are having a preparatory planning how to secure the safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. We do not know whether it's logistical preparation or increased diplomatic efforts, or even maybe the regional countries are preparing to militarily involved in terms of securing the safe passage of the oil and gas to the world market.
Now, passage through the Strait of Hormuz is key. It is something we'll discuss in a short while again with our guests. Thank you very much, Rasul Sardar, reporting there from the Saudi capital, Riyadh. Thanks, Rasul. Israel has pummeled more of Beirut's southern suburbs. Ahead of the attacks, the army issued evacuation warnings for several neighborhoods. Israel has been bombing Lebanon for 3 weeks now as the U.S.-Israel war in Iran continues. The Israeli military says that it is targeting Iran's ally, Hezbollah. And Israeli troops are simultaneously expanding their ground offensive in southern Lebanon. Airstrikes targeted several houses and commercial shops. This was in Al-Mansouri, the district of Tyre. More than 1,000 people have been killed in Lebanon, and thousands more have been displaced since hostilities resumed between Israel and Hezbollah on March the 2nd. Bernard Smith reports from Beirut.
Hezbollah don't tell you if any damage has been done. Israel may claim it's assassinated certain leaders or certain number of Hezbollah fighters, but there's no way of independently answering that. It's true that Hezbollah is considerably challenged this time by Israel, not least because the normal regular supply lines that might have had multiple through Syria from Iran have been closed off to them. But other than that, it's very difficult to get any clear information. As you know, more than 1 million people now displaced, forcibly displaced, registered with the government as being forcibly displaced, and over about 120,000 official government shelters. But they're very basic shelters, a lot of them, and in this appalling weather that we've had today and the last couple of days, it's very uncomfortable and it's a pretty grim circumstances. They're being fed mainly by charity organisations. The government, cash-strapped, is not really able to provide much, and people just really want to know when they can go home. They are stuck, really, because nobody knows when they can go home, and there's no indication that Israel and Hezbollah's fight is over at any time soon.
Let's get more on the disruption to the global energy trade through the Strait of Hormuz. South and East Asian countries have been particularly vulnerable. Now, Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, says Japanese ships will be allowed to transit through the strait. Speaking in an interview with Japanese media, he emphasized that the strait remains open. He says access is only closed for ships belonging to the enemies or those involved in the attacks, while vessels from other nations may pass through. He added that discussions with Japan are ongoing to ensure safe passage and that Iran is prepared to facilitate secure transit. For more on all of this, let's bring in our guests. Joining us in the studio is Paul Musgrave, Associate Professor at Georgetown University here in Qatar and a U.S. foreign policy analyst. And from the Iranian capital, Tehran, Zohreh Khwarazmi. She's an Associate Professor at the University of Tehran. A warm welcome to both of you. Zohreh, it's good to have you back on the program. It is interesting and notable today that Iran is really trying to finesse its strategy when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. In the first instance, in the first moments of the war, the strait was closed, period. No tankers were going through it. And then in recent days, that has started to change somewhat. And today, it's become, I should say in the last few days, it's become essentially official Iranian policy that they are going to allow some ships through and not others. I wanted your thoughts on that.
Actually, having a sustainable security is the right and of a sovereign state like the Islamic Republic. And a Strait of Hormuz should be considered in a bigger picture that also bombarding Natanz nuclear plants, also destroying 16 civil vessels in Bandar in south of Iran, also invading Khark is part of the puzzle. So if you are to judge it, you should have a sort of
invading Khark Island has not happened.
No, I mean this is just bombarding to facilitate and pave the way for invasion, as the American sources are indicating. So I mean that for Iran, this retaliation security is a very important system from the United States assets and the interlinked assets will be the legitimate targets. And the GCC countries and actually these entities that are very much be really sovereign in their territories, stop United States and Israel to use their air and also the territories to attack Iran, so they should not act as a platform of aggression. And then the Strait of Hormuz would just retrieve its security as well. When you're talking about Natanz, do you know what is the meaning of bombarding Natanz once more after the 12-day war for Iranians? It means that they said that it's obliterated it, but they're serial liars. They attacked it again. They going to even move to have more escalation. They are going to change the Iranian nuclear posture in near future. And this anarchy and mess, do you know who should be blamed for? The United States, this proxies in the region, and Israel. Israel like to have a scorched earth policy in the region, doesn't like to not see GCC or Iran to be prosperous and happy, and Trump is a hostage in their hand. So if you like to blame someone, it's not Iran to blame, actually the United States and Israel to blame for.
Okay, Khwarazmi has covered a lot of ground in that answer. One thing I would just point out for our viewers, Khwarazmi, when you say that Gulf nations should be sovereign, I'm pretty sure that they would answer they are sovereign, and when they come to their security alliances and who they allow to host bases in their country, that is their decision. That's the definition of sovereignty. But we can come back to that later. I want to stay
If they are hosting the enemy, they are enemy then.
Okay. Well, that's not what Iran has been saying. Iran has been saying we want to remain friends with our countries, with our neighboring countries.
Sure. Unless their air and the territory is not used as a platform of active aggression. Look at Wall Street Journal. The two military officials from the United States indicating that how Saudi Arabia air is used for refueling bombers that are bombing Iranian cities. Look at the CENTCOM that released the videos in March that indicate that the HIMARS systems are used in the deserts in the GCC. Look at Bahrain, Nasser, actually that's the commander of the Royal Guard, that talked about how they are integrated in the Americans' operations. So there are lots of actually, and the radars are indicating well that the GCC entities are becoming a platform of active aggression. So there is no way out if they are not using their sovereignty and territory to stop the United States from active aggression.
Okay, since Khamenei is taking the conversation in this direction, this has been part of the Iranian strategy that Gulf countries have, pretty much all of them, in fact all of them, have security alliances with the U.S. They host U.S. bases. That the idea has been for a long time that this would protect Gulf countries. And Iran is trying to change their calculus. You think it's a gift? We're going to show you it's actually a curse, because now you're targeted on account of those U.S. bases. Do you think that long term that is a strategy that can work for Iran and force Gulf countries to recalculate?
This is something that, as you can imagine, people think about all the time when we're trying to judge what the effects of this are going to be. My own belief is that what Iran is doing is they're actually playing too hard. What you target demonstrates your capability and your intention. If the targets had remained only American military installations, this would be a much different conversation. But instead, as with the strike on Ras Laffan, what we have seen is Iran, main natural gas site, responsible for 80% of government revenues, huge chunk of GDP, and of course it's been hit 17% offline for the next 3 to 5 years. This is an attack on Qatar's lifeblood, right? And it's civilian targets across the GCC. If those had not been targeted, I think the tenor of conversations in the Gulf would be different. But instead, by trying to frame this around security interests strictly for Iran and not recognizing the security interests of the GCC, what Iran is perhaps unintentionally saying is that were the United States to leave, there would only be one power in the region, and that would be Iran. And talking about the Strait of Hormuz as Iran's national security.
But yeah, that's what the launch pads look like. Do it. So they'll have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of these. Did I do that right? Yeah, 10. But yeah, that's what the launch pads look like. Yeah, Stevie. But Stevie, I do think that they are working some of the ships out of there. This is also, I don't feel like doing it because I don't. But you can find spicy Doritos drones that are in here. I'm trying to find you what year. But this is how they know that there's drones in there. But yeah, usually buildings that are marked like this or look like this are drones. Also, have y'all ever heard of Missile City? That's another thing. Yeah, Missile City right here. Check this place out. This is in Iran. Dun, 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 dun. Look at this. You just keep on going and going and going. Let me pull out. That's what he said. But yeah, you can just keep on going and going and going and going. Of all of these missiles. But yeah, I mean, it is massive. So to give you an idea, it goes all the way over here to all the way over here. To give you a distance, that would be roughly 5 miles. 5 miles. 5 miles of it. With 1.5 miles wide. So it's literally known as Missile City. And then here's the other thing is right in this area right here. So let me pull out a little bit. That's what he said. So right here you have the strait, okay? But here on the right-hand side, you have a underground base. This is where they launched the drones out of. I have no idea how many drones they have, but they showed it off. The IRGC bragged about it years ago.
Widest point. Secondly, the waters are shallow, confining supertankers to two tight shipping lanes, one for going in and the other for going out. The limited space means that if they're attacked, these huge ships have very little room to maneuver. Iran controls the islands nearby. That includes Keshm, Abu Musa, the Greater and Lesser Tums, and Larak, which it can use as military outposts to launch drones and missiles. But Iran has another advantage. Its southern coastline is mountainous. This provides camouflage for fortified bunkers deep underground, but also for missile launchers. Iran has plenty of military options at its disposal. That includes fast attack craft, submarines, and mines. US forces have been targeting its naval assets, but Iran says it retains significant capabilities. So what would it take to end its grip on the Strait of Hormuz? Well, naval vessels would need to escort commercial tankers, and that's to help provide protection against any attacks. The waterway would also have to be cleared of any mines, and perhaps most significantly, the entire operation would require international cooperation.
A police officer has died as a drone crashed near the Iraqi intelligence headquarters in Baghdad. Officials say the drone was targeting the headquarter complex in a western suburb of the Iraqi capital. It follows an attack on the U.S. military complex near the international airport overnight. Al Jazeera's Asad Beg is in Baghdad. Asad, Iraq is a complex picture, and there have been strikes going both ways, from the U.S. and Israel towards armed groups, and from a multitude of armed groups towards U.S. targets. Can you paint the picture for us of what's happening in Iraq?
Yes, I'll try my best. So you have, as you said, the U.S. and Israel carrying out strikes against Iraqi armed factions allied to Iran. You have Iran carrying out strikes against Iranian Kurdish opposition groups, and then you have armed Iraqi factions who come under the Iraqi military, carrying out carrying out drone attacks against the U.S. embassy, bases, as well as Iranian Kurdish opposition groups. Now, what we saw this morning was a drone strike, the authorities say, against the Iraqi National Intelligence Service. If this was carried out by a Iraqi armed faction, no one has claimed responsibility yet, it would add another dynamic to this conflict, because this would be the first attack against the Iraqi security apparatus. So far, it's been U.S. bases, U.S. interest, and Iranian Kurdish opposition groups. And this makes it very complicated for Baghdad. They're trying to balance the relationship they have with the United States, the relationship they have with Iran, and also these very powerful armed factions within their own country that technically come under the military and receive state funding.
Assad, Iraq has been in turmoil almost continuously since 2003, when the U.S. invaded and toppled Saddam. How are Iraqis responding to this latest round of uncertainty and volatility in their country?
Well, it depends where you are. Here in Baghdad, if you drive around, you talk to people, you can't help but see the posters of the former Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, around the city. Also, you see posters of Qasem Soleimani, the former head of the Al-Quds Force, Iran's Al-Quds Force, that was killed by the United States in Iraq in 2020, as well as Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, the deputy leader of the Popular Mobilization Forces. He was an Iraqi, killed by the United States in 2020. So there is support for Iran. There is solidarity with Iran, ideologically and religiously. But if you go to, for example, the north of Iraq, in the semi-autonomous Kurdish region, well, The authorities there have said that
Buried
they're very keen
deep
not to
inside a
get dragged
mountain.
into a conflict or
A show
not to
of
be a
force
part of any
aimed
military
at Iran's
escalation.
enemies.
Yet they are finding their territory being attacked by both Iran and armed Iraqi factions targeting Iranian Kurdish opposition groups. So there is this uncertainty, there is this dynamic
across the country. It's proof that Tehran has been preparing for a war just like this one for years and possibly decades. It's also from these mountain bases that Iran stores its mobile missile launchers, taking them out, firing, before hiding them back into the mountain to reload and avoid detection. The US and Israel want to destroy this threat.
And just like Hamas and their tunnels, Iran has funneled decades of state resources not to their people, but into missiles and drones and proxies and buried facilities. But we are hunting them down.
We wanted to find out how. Examining satellite images from 27 underground bases, including 107 tunnels. What we found was evidence of a rapid-fire American-Israeli campaign to trap a large number of Iranian munitions underground, blocking entrances and exits to these bases. Like here, here, and here, access points to these facilities blocked. We found that the US and Israel bombed at least 77% of the tunnel entrances that we were able to review satellite images of. Here we see rockets fired from mobile launchers towed out of tunnels. The images are from propaganda video released last year. We geolocated this video to here, a large underground city with many of the access points ravaged by US and Israeli bombardment earlier this month. Here we see huge craters surrounding a tunnel portal. Here, a destroyed rocket launcher and a reddish cloud of highly toxic rocket fuel. But less than 48 hours after the site was first bombed, evidence of Iranians already digging for access to their munitions underground. And this isn't the first time Iran's jumped to repair its underground facilities.
Tehran is completely filled with smoke.
After the 12-day war with Israel last June, Iran repaired missile production facilities, an industrial complex linked to uranium enrichment centrifuges, and subterranean medium-range missile sites, like this one, where Iran reopened access points to those munitions, again starting to repair them just 48 hours after that war ended. The US and Israel continue to score tactical successes around underground facilities, but these might be temporary solutions as Iran continues to adapt. Now, these are huge battlefield achievements by the US and Israel, heavily degrading Iran's military capability. But experts say that Iran remains resilient and has just enough munitions to continue to hit strategic positions such as oil and gas and civilian infrastructure. This adds another layer of complexity and of unpredictability to this war. Kate?
Certainly. Tomorrow, thank you so much. That. In fact, I had a conversation with General Zinni a few years back, who was the envoy for establishing that, and he said it was just impossible to get the states to be on the same page, even to not even want to agree on anything, let alone an Article 5 agreement that NATO has. So I think it's very difficult for the Gulf states to have an alternate in terms of security. Of course, the situation is not ideal, but like I said before,
few other options, yeah.
Yeah, other options are narrow, and they're no good options.
Hence your conclusion in this article that Gulf states are going to double down, as you say, on their security cooperation with the U.S. The second big question you address in this article is Gulf posture vis-a-vis Iran. More engagement or more hostility? You say they were going to have to continue to engage with Iran, despite the fact that they're coming under daily attack, drones, missiles fired from Iranian territory.
Yes, you know, unfortunately, Gulf states are limited by their geography. And Iran is very close, a very close neighbor. They have a long history with the Gulf states. They can strategically cause havoc in the Gulf, as we've seen. And therefore, due to circumstance, the Gulf states must engage with Iran. Yes, of course, there are different degrees of engagement. Some Gulf states are being more aggressive in their stance, like namely Saudi and the UAE right now. You know, even when Ras Laffan was hit, Qatar didn't expel the embassy. It only expelled certain attachés in the embassy.
Yeah, there are still Iranian diplomats in this country, even now, even as ballistic missiles and drones are being launched almost daily, even at Qatar.
That's because Qatar believes in engagement, containment through engagement, and mediation is a core part of Qatar's security strategy. And so I think that they will continue to try to keep the door open as much as possible.
All right, Danya Taffer, thank you very much for joining us in the studio to discuss this.
Thank you so much.
Restrictions on the movement of oil have sent shockwaves through global markets. The UK is bracing for the economic impact of rising energy prices. Milena Veselinovic reports from London on the potential consequences of a protracted war.
Here in the City of London, traders are calculating how the fallout from the war in the Middle East will impact ordinary people. And first up, it's the cost of buying a home. Because investors are expecting interest rate hikes, it means that mortgages and loans will become more expensive. And there's more. The price of fuel is soaring, making it so much more expensive to fill up your car. But the higher cost of oil doesn't just impact on drivers, it makes it more expensive to run a business, to transport goods, and those costs tend to get passed on, which in turn means higher prices across the board. And let's look at air travel. The cost of jet fuel is surging. It has doubled in Europe and up more than 80% in Asia. It will be the customers who bear the brunt of this, with European airlines warning it will drive up prices. And when it comes to energy bills, they're forecast to rise by hundreds of dollars in the UK, a sharp increase amid the cost of living crisis that Britain and a number of European nations had already been struggling with. Well, there's a knock-on effect on food too. Farmers here in the UK say the fertilizer is so expensive, they're considering whether it's worth it for them to plant all their fields. If they don't, there'll be fewer crops and then fewer products on the shelves by water, making them more expensive. And of course, all of this depends in part on how long this war lasts. But many experts say that even if there were a ceasefire today, a lot of these costs are already baked in and not reversible. Milena Veselinovic, Al Jazeera, London.
Let's take a look at other news now. It's Mother's Day across most of the Arab world and the Middle East. It is usually a time of celebration, of course, but in Palestine, it's a day of grief and hardship because mothers mourn children lost in the war and children face the day without their mothers. Hind Khudri reports from Gaza.
In most places, Mother's Day is filled with flowers, gifts, and celebration. But here in Gaza, it is marked by tears and grief. Mothers who lost their children during the war, killed in Israeli attacks, mark this day in mourning instead of celebration. Like Imrami, she still lost 3 of her sons.
It talks about 2,000 miles being the maximum range of the Iranian ballistic missile program. When I was in the military, it was pretty clear that Iran wanted a missile capable of reaching continental United States. And it isn't about just having a bigger missile, because obviously a lot of its flight track is through space, so it doesn't have any drag. But there's lots of complications once you start going long distances. But this distance here, about 4,000 kilometres, as you say, it's over 2,000 miles. And therefore, they were very successfully able to strike that far, which raised the question, how much further could those missiles actually strike?
How many miles from Iran to the United States?
Well, I think you're at 12,000 kilometres, so you're talking about significantly more. But as I say, actually, it's more about, once you get the missile into space, it's free flow, and then you've got to control it on the way down. So some of it is more about technology than it is about the size of the missiles. And it's been long declared that this was a capability that Iran had up its sleeve. I think what's interesting is the fact that they didn't actually hit their targets. It's also the news this morning seems to be making a big thing about this being a UK base. We have to point out, I think there are less than 100 UK personnel there. It's largely dominated by the United States. And given that the United States is the lead of the fight, the war in Iran, it's an entirely legitimate target if you look at it through Iran's lens. And it does appear that defensive systems have worked.
But as you were saying, expensively so, right?
Oh, very expensive, but what price do you pay on protecting yourself? I think the other interesting thing is that there's a lot of political commentary about whether our government was right not to side with America. And you go, the worry is always that if you do, you become a target. If Iran does have missiles that are capable of reaching the UK, then we would be very worried because we have no ballistic missile defence capability in this country. And therefore, this morning, rather than being Diego Garcia, which America has been launching attacks from, if we were actually involved in the war, we could be having a missile winging its way to London. We could certainly track it, but we couldn't do anything about it.
Interesting.
Canel told a group of foreign activists bringing humanitarian aid to the island that Cuba is preparing for possible U.S. military aggression. The U.S. has been maintaining a fuel blockade on Cuba, and the country has been coping with the collapse of its energy grid as a result.
We recognize that there could be an aggression against Cuba, and we have unleashed a preparation plan to raise our people's readiness for defense in the interest of the war of all the people, which is our defense concept and which is a defensive conception, not aggressive, and to defend the country with the preparation of all the people in defense.
A U.S. judge has struck down the Pentagon's controversial press access policy, saying many parts of it are unconstitutional. The policy placed a number of restrictions on reporting. It included the need for journalists to sign a pledge to only report information approved by the Department of Defense. A number of high-profile media outlets refused to sign the policy and lost their accreditation. The New York Times then filed a lawsuit over the policy back in December. Hundreds of people have been rescued from major floods in the U.S. state of Hawaii. Many homes have been destroyed on the island of Oahu. It's the worst flooding to hit Hawaii in more than 20 years. Mandatory evacuation orders have been issued. Officials say that heavy rainfall could put the island's Wahiawa Dam at an imminent risk of failure. Last year, the U.S. suspended most of its foreign aid. That affected more than $12 billion in annual support to Africa. Instead of donor-driven aid, the U.S. is now offering transactional agreements known as health compacts. But some African governments and activists say that these deals come with too many strings attached, from mining interests to control over patients' data. Zera's Harun Matassa reports from Zimbabwe's capital, Harare.
It's visiting hour at Sally Mugabe Hospital, and people are going to see friends and relatives who are sick. Like many public health care facilities in Zimbabwe, there are shortages of TB drugs and essential medicines. The government has for decades struggled to fund its public health care sector. Rumbidzai Pondamari gets her antiretroviral drugs for free from humanitarian agencies. She worries global cuts to funding and aid could lead to shortages. When she heard her government had rejected a $367 million deal with the United States, she panicked.
Buying pills at the pharmacy costs $15 to $20. I can't afford that. If I stop taking these HIV drugs, I will die.
Government officials in Harare say they refused the so-called health compact because Washington demanded access to Zimbabwe's biological samples for research. There's no guarantee that Zimbabwe will have access to vaccines or treatments that might be developed from data collected from Africans and sent to the US.
Can't you see that we're going back to the slave trade days, where actually our able and strong men were supposed to go there and help the West in their economic development, because here maybe they were not needed according to them. Those types of racial undertones and slave trade type of attitudes is what we thought were being projected here.
These are some of the African countries in negotiation.
مواجهة نهاية حتمية. أما الحلفاء فلم يسلموا أيضاً، وجه انتقاداً علنياً لبريطانيا بسبب التردد في تقديم الدعم العسكري. أما هنا هجوم على حلف الناتو واتهامه بالتقاعس. بينما الإعلام فكان هدفاً دائماً في تدويناته اتهامات مباشرة بنشر معلومات مضللة، حتى المطالبة بمحاكمة بعض المؤسسات بتهمة الخيانة. ترامب لم يكتفي بالخطاب السياسي، بل أبحر في تفاصيل العمليات. علق مباشرة على استهداف حقل بارس، فيما يوجه رسائل تحذير بعد كل ضربة. غداء السالم، العربية.
مشاهدينا، إلى هنا أختم هذه الساعة. ستلقاكم على رأس الساعة الزميلة منتهى الرمحي. ابقوا معنا، تغطية العربية مستمرة. أهلا بكم ومستمرون معكم في التغطية على شاشة العربية للحرب في إيران في يومها 22. أفادت وسائل إعلام إيرانية بمقتل قائد وحدة المسيرات بسلاح الجو التابع للحرس الثوري في هجوم استهدف منزله بمدينة رامسر شمالية إيران، فيما لم تؤكد الجهات الرسمية الخبر.
Israel says joint US airstrikes on Iran will again intensify through the course of the next week as Iran continues to retaliate, including with 2 intercontinental ballistic missiles that have been fired towards a US military base in Diego Garcia. It's not yet known how far the missiles travelled on the British overseas territory, 4,000 miles away in the Indian Ocean, while Washington says it's taken out an Iranian base threatening the Straits of Hormuz. We're live in Washington with the Guardian Bureau Chief, David Smith, coming up in a moment. Meanwhile, 2 conflicting narratives appear to be playing out within the Trump administration over what happens next. The US president has told reporters he may wind down the war, hailing a military success, while officials in Washington have been briefing CBS News that thousands more Marines and 3 more warships are being sent to the Middle East, with an amphibious force of around 5,500 strong, now said to be heading to the Gulf. We'll assess the noise and the signals in the conflict now in its 4th week. And the Iranian-backed militant group in Lebanon, Hezbollah, says its fighters are involved in clashes with Israeli forces in 2 towns in the south of the country. It's reported to have fired rockets too into northern Israel, while the IDF says it's continuing to hit Hezbollah targets in the south and in the capital Beirut, striking a headquarters. We will be live in the Lebanese capital, a country where 1 in 5 are now estimated to have been displaced and have more than 1,000 killed. We'll talk to our reporter, Claire Paquelin, shortly. And we'll also be live in the Hungarian capital, Budapest, where dozens of leaders from the populist right, the hard right, the far right are all gathering as the Prime Minister Viktor Orbán plays host to the Global Conservative Conference, known as CPAC. It is happening in the middle of election campaigning, with Orbán's Fidesz party facing the risk of losing.
قدسي فيصل ناظم القدسي ما بيلاقي شيء كتير ما بيلاقي.
Drones has recently spiked as they have proven successful in intercepting larger loitering munitions, according to a Skyforce spokesman. They're also cheap to produce, easy to customize and fast to deploy, according to its makers.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban raised the prospect of further actions against Ukraine on Friday, a day after he doubled down on his veto against the European Union's €90 billion loan.
Magyarországnak Ukrajna olajblokkádjának letörésére nem csak a 90 milliárdos hitelblokkolás van a kezében. Nekünk vannak más eszközeink is. 40%-a ukrán villamos energia ellátása Magyarországon keresztül megy. Ahhoz még hozzá se nyújtunk. Folyamatosan új szankciós csomagokat akarnak bevezetni, az egyhangúságot igényel. Majd nem adjuk meg. Hasonlóképpen a következő 7 éves költségvetésben Ukrajnának pénzt akarnak adni. Majd nem hagyjuk jó. Azt akarom mondani, hogy rengeteg kártya van a kezünkben. Tehát szerintem nem érdemes kötözködni Magyarországon.
Tensions between Hungary and Ukraine have escalated in recent weeks into a bitter feud over Hungary's access to Russian oil through the Druzhba pipeline, which was damaged in what Ukraine says was a Russian drone strike. Orban, however, insists that Ukraine has purposely sabotaged the pipeline to orchestrate an energy crisis ahead of a tight election. EU leaders rebuked what they called unacceptable behavior by Hungary akin to blackmail following an EU summit on Thursday, accusing Orban of holding up critical aid and undermining EU decision-making in an effort to win an election at home.
The French Navy intercepted and boarded a tanker in the Mediterranean Sea on Friday. President Emmanuel Macron said it is linked to Russia's sanctioned shadow fleet, which ships oil in violation of international sanctions over Moscow's war on Ukraine. The tanker Dana is suspected of operating under a false flag designation. The interception took place in the Western Mediterranean and was carried out in cooperation with allies such as the United Kingdom. The tanker was diverted and escorted by the French Navy to an anchorage point for further checks. The case was referred to a prosecutor in the port of Marseille.
Stay connected to the expanding Iran war with live updates from Euronews correspondents across the Middle East on Euronews and Euronews.com.
Welcome to The Ring, to this very special edition, broadcasting live here from downtown Brussels. My name is Maeve McMahon and I'm one of the presenters of The Ring, which is our weekly debating show that sees MEPs go face to face on some of the most pressing issues of our time. The topic that we're jumping into today is healthcare and who should pay.
US. RAF Akrotiri is not going to be part of that, and that was expressed during a conversation between the Prime Minister and the Cypriot President earlier today. Downing Street just releasing that statement in the last few minutes. It's clear, listening to Yvette Cooper, that the UK is trying its level best to put space between what the Israelis and the US are doing and what the UK is doing. Yvette Cooper repeatedly saying we want a swift conclusion, we are embroiled in defensive action, not offensive action, and acknowledging that there is an escalating threat from Iran, but that defensive policy will continue. We've heard, haven't we, that over the last few days Iran have begun to escalate their activities, not just attacking military bases, but attacking unarmed commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, including British-flagged vessels, something which will be of huge concern to the British. But time and again today, from Yvette Cooper, from Downing Street and from the Prime Minister, we have been hearing this message that the UK is not involved in offensive operations. It is merely trying to defend itself, defend its actions, and that is an attempt to try and put some clear blue water between what the Israelis and the US are doing and what the UK are doing in reaction to that. So that's very much the message coming from the UK. They are calling for de-escalation, and in their minds will be the impact on British citizens. In the last 3 weeks, this conflict has had a direct impact on all sorts of cost of living issues in the UK. We know about it: fuel, heating oil, petrol at the pumps, diesel, gas. Bills will rise because of this. And so the government are now treading a fine line between saying we will defend our interests, but we want this to de-escalate for the good of British citizens, try and get that oil price stabilised so that people don't feel the pinch in their pockets.
OK, Nick in Westminster, thank you very much.
Well, let's get more on that Iranian attack on the British-American base at Diego Garcia. We're joined now by our military analyst, Sean Bell. Sean.
So Diego Garcia was attacked for the first time last night as part of this conflict. Why is this important? Well, Diego Garcia, shown here, is in the Chagos Islands. It's part in the Indian Ocean. It's UK-owned at the moment, but it's a joint military base. There's only about 50 UK military personnel there, up to 5,000 American personnel, largely focused on the air base, where they operate a number of their B-1 bombers, and they've been very active throughout the course of the war. Now, there are recent reports overnight that actually 2 Iranian ballistic missiles were fired at the islands. One, we understand, broke up on re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. The other one apparently was targeted by the US Aegis CM-3 missile system, very expensive, very capable. We don't know exactly whether that hit the missile. What we do know is there's no damage on the ground and no reports of casualties. But the key issue that's of importance here is this range. Before the war, we understood the Iranian missiles, ballistic missiles, could go out to around 2,000 miles, whereas on this time it was over 2,500 miles, the range. And actually, the question then is, could it have actually gone further? Now, the Ministry of Defence has long suspected that Iran is trying to develop missiles to be able to reach continental United States. And of course, if they can get that far, if you look at the top left corner, it can also get to the United Kingdom as well. And that's why it's really important if the UK government is actually re-emphasising at the moment why it's only using its air bases for defensive means, because bluntly, if one of these missiles was fired at the UK, we would be able to track it coming in, but there'd be no way of actually shooting it down. If we look at the Straits of Hormuz now, obviously under Iranian control, creating a choke point, it's not just about energy, it's also about food. Many countries in the Middle East cannot grow their own food, and therefore that causes a real issue as well. And if President Trump does decide to walk away, as he is predicted to do, he says he doesn't use the Straits at all, that could create a real big problem. There's no easy military solution to this. And if the US Navy walks away, the West would really be struggling. Iran has had 35 years to prepare. And let's look at some of the capabilities the Iranians have. At the far left, we've got anti-ship missiles. These are Mark III, very capable, sea-skimming missiles, 500-kilogram warheads, actually provided by China. And there's a bit of an oil for arms deal going on here, where China provides 50 of these missiles in return for some of their oil is still getting through the Straits. It's also providing China invaluable operational experience about one of their export missiles. There's also mines, fast patrol boats. These are quite small, often unmanned, packed full of explosives, and individually not too dangerous, but collectively could be a nightmare. And likewise, a lot of drones as well in the region. Now, all of this, Iran knows it is no answer to America's military might, and that's why it's developed these bespoke capabilities to retain control of the Straits of Hormuz. And they've got months' worth of supplies of these hidden away. There is no easy military solution to this challenge, although we don't know what the thousands of US Marines are going to do when they arrive in the region. But if Trump walks away, as it looks like he's trying to prepare to do, and declares a military victory, the grave challenge here is it leaves Iran in control of the Straits of Hormuz and potentially grants Iran a strategic success.
Sean, thank you. US President Donald Trump said last night that he is considering winding down the war in Iran. In the 3 weeks since it began, the US has hit more than 8,000 targets. Well, Iran said today that the Natanz nuclear site had been bombed. Iranian state media reported there was no leakage of radioactive materials or danger to residents nearby. Despite the bombardment, thousands of Iranian worshippers gathered at Tehran's Grand Mosque for prayers to mark the end of Ramadan. Worshippers also held funeral services for a Revolutionary Guard spokesman who was killed in an Israeli strike yesterday. Iran has continued to launch retaliatory strikes right across the region. Iranian drones caused a huge fire near a US military complex in Baghdad that's come under repeated attack since the war began. And Israel says fragments of an Iranian missile struck a kindergarten in the centre of the country. The building in Rishon LeZion was empty and closed, and the classroom sustained damage, but no casualties were reported. Sky correspondent Cordelia Lynch is in Beirut for us. So, Cordelia, the attacks continue as the Israeli military says they may well intensify.
Yes, we've had two very conflicting statements from the US and Israel. On the one hand, you have Donald Trump saying they are reaching the end of their goals. Quite what those goals are is still very unclear. At the beginning, he was hinting at regime change through some kind of popular uprising about dismantling Iran's nuclear program. Now the language is more about weakening Iran's military capabilities and supporting America's allies in the region. You saw a shift just yesterday when he spoke ultimately about bringing some kind of end to this, bringing an end to the kind of American campaign. At the same day, he was also talking about not being willing to go to a ceasefire just yet. So there is confusion. I think people are trying to unpick exactly what he wants to do, but he certainly seems to be giving himself some kind of wiggle room. The fact is, though, you also have the US military saying they've hit 8,000 targets, and next month they are due to send 2,500 military personnel. On the opposite side of the coin, you have Israel, the defense minister saying they're going to be stepping up their attack next week, and they have long been preparing Israel for a protracted war with Iran and with Lebanon here, and we've seen strikes overnight exchanged between Iran, between Hezbollah. And I think what is becoming clear when you speak to analysts is that it is going to be very challenging indeed to dismantle Iran's nuclear capabilities from the air alone. So the big question for Donald Trump is whether he will back US troops on the ground. From his language so far, that doesn't
Traded strikes on Saturday as President Donald Trump said the US was considering winding down its military operation against Iran, adding that it was close to meeting its military goals. Washington has sent mixed messages about the conflict, having in the last 24 hours also confirmed it was sending thousands more Marines to the Middle East. Trump said he thought Israel would be ready to end the war when the US does, but rejected the idea of a ceasefire.
I don't want to do a ceasefire. You know, you don't do a ceasefire when you're literally obliterating the other side.
As the war on Iran entered its fourth week, Israel also attacked Beirut, saying it was targeting the Iran-backed Hezbollah. Israel stepped up airstrikes targeting the militia in the deadliest spillover from the Middle East conflict since Hezbollah, in support of Iran, fired on Israel on March the 2nd. More than 2,000 people have been killed since the US and Israel attacked Iran on February the 28th. Americans appear increasingly concerned at signs the war could expand further. 3 US officials told Reuters on Friday that 2,500 Marines, along with an amphibious assault ship and accompanying warships, would deploy to the region. However, the officials did not say what their role would be. Vital energy infrastructure in Iran and neighbouring Gulf states has been attacked over the 3 weeks of war. It sent oil prices up 50% and threatened global economic shock. The Strait of Hormuz, which around a fifth of global oil and liquefied natural gas supplies pass through, has also been effectively closed to most shipping. Meanwhile, the president has criticised allies for refusing to help open the strait.
NATO could help us, but they so far haven't had the courage to do so, and others could help us.
Some allies in Europe, as well as Canada and Japan, have pledged to join appropriate efforts, but others, like Germany and France, have spelled out that fighting must stop before they aid in opening the strait. Washington, in an attempt to combat soaring prices and increase supply, on Friday waived sanctions on the purchase of Iranian oil at sea for 30 days.
Did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I...
a threat, but it just became one of the reasoning or justifications for this war.
Yeah, it's not the first time that there's daylight between what Donald Trump says and members of his intelligence community. Paul, this fundamental calculation that Nagar was talking about, Donald Trump says we want to be able to go back there at any point in time should we need to and hit Iran again. And Iran, their strategy is we need to fight hard enough with the U.S. and Israel that they will never want to fight with us again. This was pretty much explicitly said by the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Those two things, I was going to say on a collision course. I mean, we're past that, obviously, 3 weeks into this war. But if this is Donald Trump's off-ramp, Iran has already signaled they don't want it.
I think that's absolutely right. Ending this war is going to be a two-way street, and it is interesting to watch the United States. I want to be very careful to say the United States signal that it is dropping or regime change as an outcome, and every reiteration of U.S. goals has dropped regime change over the last week or so. Israel is not doing this. It's even more complicated. This is a triangular war. That being said, Iran is also suffering from this, not just the decapitation strike, but also the way that this war has harmed Iran's military, Iran's civilian life. Inflation is running at 50% before the war. It's gone through the roof now. And of course, Iran also depends on the Strait of Hormuz being open. And even with the selective openness that Iran has demonstrated, it's hard to get food, it's hard to get energy, it's hard to have Iran's economy going. So both sides are suffering from this. I think both sides would like to have something through. But I absolutely agree that in the last couple of confrontations, Iran did not demonstrate enough deterrence. But now I actually think that they might be going too far. They've actually too credibly shown that they have too great ambitions in the region and beyond.
So do you think then, and this goes to both of you in that case, do you think if Iran's goal is to signal, look, you fighters, we're going to fight you so hard you'll never want to come back to do this again. Do you think that they've achieved this? Paul is suggesting that maybe they have. I'm not sure Israel would agree with that. What do you think?
I agree with Paul. I think Iran has projected a lot more strength than was expected. And for them, winning is very different than the U.S. You know, they're not trying to do regime change in Israel or regime change in the U.S. They're just trying to inflict enough pain to Israel, to the U.S., and to the neighbors so that people, you know, these countries feel uncomfortable about going through this again. And I think they've achieved enough. When we talk to analysts or people even on the ground across the region, there's a very strong belief among many that Iran has already won this war because nobody expected them to perform so well, to open multiple fronts and be able to conduct essentially this asymmetric war, turn it into a war of attrition. And as Paul says, this leaks through the statements coming from the White House and the president that I think he's done. I think he's tired. And this wasn't an operation that was supposed to go for so long. I think the president has shown that he likes one and done, in and out. You know, the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, Midnight Hammer, 25 minutes, Venezuela, one day. These big operations, show of strength, peace through strength. You show strength and then you move on and then there's peace. And Iran has just created so much challenge for him and they keep escalating. And now the end is not in sight because the Iranians are saying, we're not ready to take a ceasefire if you're not ready to offer the sort of comprehensive deal that they're looking at.
All right, we'll have to leave it here for now, but thank you very much to both of you, Negar Mortazavi, Paul Musgrave. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A quick look at some of the day's other news now. It's Mother's Day across most of the Arab world and the Middle East. That usually, of course, is a time of celebration, but in Palestine, it is a day of grief and hardship as mothers mourn children lost in the war and children face the day without their mothers. Al Jazeera's Hind Khudri reports from Gaza.
In most places, Mother's Day is filled with flowers, gifts, and celebration. But here in Gaza, it is marked by tears and grief. Mothers who lost their children during the war, killed in Israeli attacks, mark this day in mourning instead of celebration. Like Imrami, she still lost 3 of her sons. 2 of their bodies are still being withheld by Israeli authorities. She never said goodbye and still waits for the moment she can hold them one last time.
I miss my sons on Mother's Day. They used to bring me gifts, flowers, sweets, and ask me about my needs. They were the light of my life. I keep looking at their photos and clothes.
Inside her tent, their photos rest beneath her pillow. She looks at them every day, as if holding on will keep their memory alive. She has not given away their clothes. They are the only last pieces she has left of her sons. Other mothers spend this day in graveyards, sitting beside their children's graves and the only place they feel close to them. And for many children, there is no Mother's Day at all. Their mothers were killed, leaving behind silence where loved ones lived. Maram Ahmed is 14 years old, the sole survivor of her family. She lost her mother, her closest friend, in an Israeli airstrike that killed her entire family. This year, Maram will not celebrate. She will watch other children with their mothers in silence.
On Mother's Day, even if I didn't have money, I would buy my mum a gift from my allowance, even if it was for less than $1. I just wanted to make her happy. This year, my mum's not with me. This is the second Mother's Day without her. I feel so sad when I see other children with their mothers, but I don't show it.
This day carries unbearable loss for mothers who lost their children and for children who lost their mothers. On Mother's Day in Gaza, there's no celebrations, only loss. Mothers are grieving and children are left behind. Al Jazeera, Gaza, Palestine.
Hundreds of people have been rescued from major floods in the U.S. state of Hawaii. Many homes have been destroyed on the island of Oahu. This is the worst flooding to hit Hawaii in more than 2 decades. Mandatory evacuation orders have been issued, officials saying that heavy rainfall could put the island's Wahiawa Dam at an imminent risk of failure. Our comprehensive coverage of the Iran war continues in just a moment. Inside Story, we'll be asking whether Yemen's Houthi fighters will be joining the fighting alongside the Iranian forces. And we'll be live in Tehran and Washington right after that.
Hard-hitting interviews.
Aren't you afraid that you might be one of the targets?
Anyone could become a target. We have seen that they have no hesitation about targeting any place.
Facing realities.
Qatar still trust enough to me. Let's say that this aggression brings a benefit for no one.
Thought-provoking answers.
How many have been displaced inside Iran?
I've heard 3 million. It could be more.
Hear their story on Talk to Al Jazeera.
Examining the impact of today's headlines, setting the agenda for tomorrow's discussions. International filmmakers and world-class journalists bring programs to inform and inspire you on Al Jazeera.
نفتقد والبحرين تفتقد للسياح الذين اعتادوا القدوم في مثل هذه الأوقات.
Avoid a nuclear accident. Meanwhile, Iran fired 2 intermediate-range ballistic missiles at a joint US-UK military base in the Indian Ocean. The missiles reportedly did not strike the base, but it does show Iran is not hesitant to use missiles that reach beyond the Middle East. The latest developments come as the US is deploying additional warships and troops to the region. This is despite mixed signals from US President Donald Trump suggesting